Opening hook. 2 lines most people respond to a narcissist with emotion. And every time they do, they hand the narcissist exactly what they were looking for. What almost no one realizes is that there is one response so simple, so quiet, and so completely unexpected that it stops the entire manipulation sequence before it begins. Step 2. Key points 1 and 2, expanded approximately 300 words. There is something fundamental about how narcissistic behavior operates that most people never fully understand while they are inside the experience of it. And that misunderstanding is precisely what keeps the dynamic running. Every provocation the narcissist produces, every boundary violation, every carefully timed cruelty, every manipulative reframe, none of these are ends in themselves. They are requests specifically. They are requests for an emotional response. And the response doesn't need to be positive to serve the narcissist system. Anger serves it. Tears serve it. Defensive explanation serves it. Guilt serves it. Even the calm voice that is barely containing visible distress serves it, because what the system requires is not a specific emotion, but confirmation that the emotional engagement is still active, that the target is still reachable, still affected, still organized around the narcissist's behavior in a way that produces readable and usable data. What most people don't realize is that this is the reaction economy, and every emotional response they produce, regardless of its content, is a deposit into the narcissist's control account. This is where understanding changes everything, because once the reaction economy is visible, the question of how to respond to a narcissist's behavior becomes considerably simpler. Not easier necessarily, but simpler. The goal is not to produce the right emotional response. It is to remove the emotional response as the currency of the interaction entirely. And this is precisely what a genuinely calm response accomplishes. Pay attention to what calm actually does to the narcissist's behavioral sequence, because it doesn't simply fail to reward the provocation. It actively disrupts the sequence that was producing it. The narcissist's behavior follows a script. A provocation is delivered. An emotional reaction is produced. The reaction is read and used to calibrate the next move. The sequence requires each step to produce the input. The next step runs on. Calm breaks the sequence at its second step. No emotional reaction means no input for step 3. No input for step 3 means the script cannot advance. And a script that cannot advance forces something the narcissist system rarely encounters and is poorly equipped to manage: the need to improvise. Most people miss this warning sign, not because it is invisible, but because the calm response requires something most people haven't been told they have the option of providing. Not the suppression of emotion, not a performance of indifference designed to communicate that they are unaffected, but a genuine, grounded stillness that comes from understanding what is actually happening and choosing deliberately not to feed it. There is a quality that certain people carry into interactions with narcissistic personalities that produces an immediate and observable shift in the dynamic. Not because they said something particularly powerful, not because they established a verbal boundary with impressive confidence, but because something in the register of their presence communicated information that the narcissist system processed before a single word was exchanged. Internal stability. What most people don't realize is that narcissists read behavioral signals with a sensitivity that most people never develop, because for the narcissist, accurate reading of another person's psychological state is not a social skill. It is a survival mechanism. Their entire approach to any interaction is calibrated in real time based on what the other person's behavior communicates about their vulnerability, their emotional availability, and their susceptibility to the specific tactics the narcissist is considering deploying. Genuine calm communicates something through every channel this reading system monitors simultaneously: the pace of speech, the absence of defensive body language, the quality of eye contact that is present without being challenging, the response that arrives without the slight delay of someone managing their emotional state before answering. Pay attention to what this communicates to the narcissist calibration system, because it registers not as confidence performed for their benefit, but as stability that exists independently of their presence. This is where the confusion as disruption becomes visible, because the narcissist who encounters this signal where they expected anxiety, defensiveness, or suppressed emotional reactivity must pause the script and answer an internal question before proceeding. What kind of person is this? Most people miss this warning sign entirely because the pause is brief, and what follows it is the narcissist recalibrating their approach. But in that pause, something shifted that the entire preceding interaction was designed to prevent. The assessment of this person as a reliable source of reactive supply became temporarily uncertain. Step 4. Key points 5 and 6 expanded approximately 350 words. There is a detail about how narcissists process communication that most people never account for when they are trying to navigate interactions with them. And missing it is one of the primary reasons that reasoned responses so consistently fail to produce the outcome they were intended to produce. The narcissist is not listening to what you say. They are listening to how you sound when you say it. What most people don't realize is that the content of a response, the specific words chosen, the logic deployed, the evidence presented, the boundary declared, carries significantly less information to the narcissist's reading system than the emotional register in which it is delivered. A perfectly constructed boundary statement delivered in a voice that carries anxiety communicates anxiety. A calm, simple observation delivered without emotional charge communicates something about the internal state of the person delivering it that no specific words could convey as efficiently. This is where the tone carries more information than the words. And understanding this principle changes the entire approach to responding to narcissistic behavior, because it means that the investment most people make in crafting the perfect response, finding the right words, constructing the clearest argument, identifying the most irrefutable evidence, is almost entirely misdirected. The narcissist system will ignore the content and read the delivery. And a perfectly worded response delivered in an emotionally charged register communicates one thing clearly regardless of what the words themselves say: that the provocation worked. Pay attention to what the absence of emotional charge does instead. Every manipulation tactic in the narcissist behavioral repertoire is engineered to create a specific emotional state: guilt, anxiety, shame, anger, because these states are the medium through which leverage operates. You cannot be made to feel guilty into compliance if the guilt isn't felt. You cannot be pressured through anxiety if the anxiety isn't present. You cannot be controlled through shame if the shame hasn't landed. A response delivered without emotional charge doesn't argue against the manipulation tactic. It simply declines to provide the medium, the tactic required to function. The hidden reason this is so disruptive to the narcissist system is not that it signals strength in any aggressive sense. It signals something more fundamentally threatening to a personality that depends on emotional reactivity as its primary operating resource. That this particular person may not be reachable through the usual channels, and that assessment, quiet, automatic, and immediate, changes everything about how the narcissist approaches the next interaction. There is a moment in any interaction with a narcissistic personality where the power dynamic becomes briefly and almost imperceptibly visible, not through any dramatic declaration or obvious confrontation, but through something as subtle as the way a response lands, the quality of the silence that follows it, and the almost involuntary recalibration that the narcissist system produces in its wake. This is the recalibration trigger, and most people who produce it never realize they did. What most people don't realize is that the narcissist enters every interaction with an existing behavioral model of the person they are engaging, a working assessment of what this particular individual will tolerate, how they will respond to specific approaches, and what tactics have historically produced the most efficient results. This model was built from observed behavior across previous interactions, and it runs automatically, shaping the narcissist's approach before a single word is exchanged. A genuinely calm response doesn't simply fail to confirm the existing model. It contradicts it, and a model that has been contradicted cannot continue running without adjustment. Pay attention to what this adjustment process looks like from the outside, because it produces observable behavioral signals that most people busy managing their own emotional state during the interaction consistently miss. The slight pause before the narcissist's next move. The shift in approach that suggests the previous one didn't land as expected. The subtle increase in the intensity of the next provocation as the system attempts to locate the emotional reaction that the calm response withheld. All of this is the recalibration happening in real time. This is where the consistency requirement becomes the most important principle in the entire dynamic, because a single calm response introduces uncertainty into the narcissist's behavioral model. But uncertainty can be resolved with one data point, one emotional reaction that confirms the previous model was essentially correct, and the calm was a temporary aberration. Most people miss this warning sign and provide that data point almost immediately, not because they plan to, but because maintaining genuine calm across multiple interactions with a narcissistic personality requires something most people were never told they needed to deliberately build: a consistent internal state that doesn't require the interaction to go a certain way in order to remain stable. There is a form of boundary that operates entirely differently from the kind most people attempt to establish in interactions with narcissistic personalities, and its effectiveness comes not from what it says, but from what it doesn't provide. Most people, when establishing a boundary with a narcissist, make the same structural mistake. They declare it, they explain the reasoning behind it, they describe the impact of the behavior it is responding to. They communicate the emotional weight of what has been experienced. And they deliver all of this with a degree of visible investment that communicates beneath every carefully chosen word that this boundary matters enormously to them. What most people don't realize is that visible investment is not strength in this context. It is information. Specifically, it is information about where the pressure points are, what the emotional stakes feel like from the inside, and how much sustained resistance will be required before the boundary begins to show flexibility. The boundary that doesn't need words operates on an entirely different principle. It is communicated not through declaration, but through behavioral demonstration, through a response so calm, so complete, and so entirely free of invitation to continue the exchange that it communicates the limit without providing anything to argue against, negotiate with, or apply pressure to. Pay attention to what this does to the narcissist's boundary testing process, because boundary testing requires something to test against. A verbally declared boundary provides a position. A behaviorally demonstrated one provides only a response, and a response that carries no emotional charge, no visible investment, and no implicit suggestion that sufficient pressure might eventually produce a different outcome, gives the testing process nowhere productive to go. This is where the long-term behavioral update becomes the most significant outcome of consistent calm responses across multiple interactions, because the narcissist's behavioral model of any individual person is not fixed. It is continuously updated based on received feedback. Most people never realize that every interaction they have with a narcissist is simultaneously a data point in an ongoing assessment. An assessment that determines how much effort the narcissist system allocates to this particular target going forward. Consistent calm responses don't just disrupt individual interactions, they update the assessment at a foundational level gradually shifting the narcissist's internal categorization of this person from someone whose reactions reliably provide usable supply to someone whose interactions consistently fail to produce the expected return. And a target that consistently fails to produce expected returns is a target the narcissist system begins, automatically and without drama, to deprioritize. When you examine the complete picture, the reaction economy that runs on emotional responses, regardless of their content, the pattern interrupt that genuine calm introduces into a behavioral sequence designed to produce predictable outcomes, the power signal that internal stability communicates to a system calibrated to read PS, psychological vulnerability, the confusion that disrupts the narcissist's tactical advantage at the precise moment it was designed to operate, the tone carrying more information than the words ever could, the absence of emotional charge removing the medium through which leverage is applied, the recalibration trigger that momentarily suspends the narcissist's behavioral script, the consistency requirement that transforms individual disruptions into foundational model updates, the wordless boundary that provides nothing to argue against or apply pressure to, and the long-term behavioral update that progressively shifts the narcissist's assessment of this particular target. What emerges is a portrait of a dynamic that was always more mechanical than it appeared. The narcissist's behavior was never really about you. It was about what your responses provided, and what your responses provided was determined not by your intentions, your values, or the content of what you said, but by the emotional register in which you said it. What most people don't realize is that the calm response is not a communication strategy. It is a supply removal strategy. It doesn't engage with the narcissist's behavior on the level where the behavior was designed to be engaged. It operates one level deeper, at the level of the system that produces the behavior, and it disrupts that system by withholding the one input without which the system cannot advance. Pay attention to what this reveals about where the actual leverage in these dynamics was always located, not in finding the right words, not in constructing the perfect argument, not in finally making the narcissist understand the impact of their behavior, in the quality of stillness you bring to the moment they expected to destabilize you. That stillness communicates something no words could. That whatever they were looking for here, they aren't going to find it.